So let's begin our flashcards on the executive. Flashcard number 1, vetoes, pocket vetoes, and are these formal or informal powers? So, if it's formal, it's listed in the Constitution. It's specifically in there and described in the Constitution. And both pocket vetoes and vetoes are formal powers. Although the phrase pocket veto isn't in the Constitution, the process of it is. So a veto is simply, a law is signed, a law is passed by Congress, and the president can either sign it or veto it. And if he vetoes it, then it goes back to Congress, and Congress has to have 2/3 majority vote in both the House and the Senate to override the veto. It's an important legislative power. The other option the president have is to not sign the bill. If the president doesn't sign the bill, then within 10 days, the bill becomes law, unless the session of Congress is something that ends. If the congressional session ends before those 10 days are up, then the bill simply expires and it dies. So a pocket veto is a nickname of something when a president basically doesn't sign a bill, but the session of Congress ends, then the bill dies and it's considered pocket vetoed. And so that's a formal power. It's an important power in Article 2 and the president's significant role in the legislative process. We're going to talk about other powers in the presidency. What's a formal and what's an informal power. The powers related to foreign policy are very significant. Of course, the commander-in-chief power is in the Constitution. It's in Article 2. The president is commander-in-chief of the armed forces. Very, very significant. The president does sign treaties. That is also in the Constitution. So that's a formal power. Those treaties need to be ratified by the Senate, but they are still basically something that starts with the executive branch. Executive agreements are not specifically in the Constitution. They are agreements with foreign countries that serve like treaties, but they're not ratified by the Senate. So they're not a formal constitutional power, and therefore they can be kind of struck down or overturned by a subsequent president. So a treaty is kind of a permanent thing. It's ratified by the Senate, but a executive agreement is not ratified by the Senate and therefore can be kind of undone by a subsequent presidency with the stroke of a pen. So the president has formal powers. That's what those first slides are all about. Certainly there are informal powers that the president has. The president has enormous ability to bargain and persuade. The president is somebody who can very much use different powers and levers at his disposal. He's the most visible person in the country, and they can, offer to fundraise for candidates. They can offer to, focus on certain issues for people in Congress. They can also go directly to the American people using the bully pulpit, using the media, using the State of the Union address, using social media, using television. And, these are all basically informal powers that the president has to persuade Congress to do what he wants them to do, he or she wants them to do. A more popular president who has higher approval ratings is going to be much more able to get Congress to do this because to do what he wants, because if you go against a popular president, you're really going against the American people. And so a president who can effectively communicate that is one that is more powerful. Executive orders, these are orders that are basically written by the president, and they do have the force of law. They are not explicitly listed in the Constitution, but they're derived directly from the fact that the president is the chief executive. And they have been upheld, but they can also be struck down as violations of the Constitution if the president goes too far in instructing government agencies to do certain things. That's what basically executive orders do. They instruct agencies to act in certain ways, whether it's immigration and naturalization or the EPA. These are things that the presidents often tell executive agencies what to do, and the president is the chief executive. He's in charge of these agencies. But if he tells the agencies to do too much, the courts can strike him down. We watched a video in class on Truman trying to seize the steel mills, instructing the Department of Commerce to do this. And the court said, no, this is not an appropriate use of federal power, of presidential power. So there can be limits on that. When we talk about other aspects of what the president does, We can talk about signing statements, which are simply something that the president signs alongside when he or she signs a bill. They can issue this signing statement, which says whether the president agrees with all of the bill or doesn't agree with certain aspects of it, or how the president is choosing to implement the bill and what the president will or won't do. So they're kind of a political move to maybe avoid having to do a veto. Maybe saying I'm not going to do X, Y, or Z. I want you to know why I don't like this part of the bill, but not having to veto it. Maybe they would be worried that the veto would be overridden. It's certainly an informal power, and some people think it kind of is like a fake veto. Presidents can sign a bill and then say I'm not going to do exactly what the bill tells me to do. So they can be problematic and controversial. One of the things the president does that is a formal power is appoints people to different governmental positions. So if the question is for flashcard 6, which of the following will be most scrutinized and potentially most controversial of presidential appointments and why? I think it's fair to say that life tenured judicial appointments, judges, not only to the Supreme Court, but to all levels of the federal judiciary, they're appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. And the life tenured piece is really the most important aspect of why they're most controversial. They're there for decades, potentially, and they have huge influence on how laws are interpreted. Cabinet members come and go, ambassadors come and go, and their time will be up when the president's term is up. In addition, they could come and go even during a term. So they're much more temporary figures. So they're not as controversial. So if we're going to look at flashcard 7 and talk about what actions Congress can take to thwart a policy initiative of the president, Congress can do a lot of different things. First of all, obviously you have impeachment, but that's a very rare thing. Congress could also impede the approval of presidential appointments, whether it's judges or cabinet secretaries. Congress can launch investigations into presidential actions, which they've certainly done. Congress can withdraw funding from government agencies or government programs. Congress could override a presidential veto. So this is in essence asking us about checks and balances and what limits does Congress impose on the executive branch. Also, they wouldn't ratify treaties. So there are plenty of checks and balances here, and the president is definitely a limited figure, especially in divided government when he doesn't have a Congress that is going to cooperate with him. This one here, flashcard 8, says, what can the other branches do to prevent implementation of executive orders? So if we're talking about the judicial branch, they can strike down an executive order as unconstitutional. Congress, if they're unsatisfied with an executive order, they could pass a law that changes what the government agency is allowed to do, and that would be pretty straightforward. If the president passes an executive order that says, the Environmental Protection Agency needs to issue more regulations about automobile emissions, well, Congress can pass a law saying, well, now here are the regulations. Here are the rules. They can give them directly. So Congress can really override that. Obviously, Congress can influence the heads of these agencies as well and not confirm them, although that's more of, that wouldn't be necessarily trying to stop implementation directly. But I think passing a law is probably the easiest way for Congress to try to prevent implementation or taking action in the court system. And then funding. Funding is another way in which Congress can remove funding from government agencies, make it harder for them to carry out their roles. So this is a good place to stop, the first 8 flashcards, and we'll pick up with some other content and material in our next video.